The royal gala was supposed to display unity, tradition, and the strength of the next generation. Instead, one cutting remark transformed the glittering evening into a deeply personal crisis. Before stunned guests could fully understand what had happened, Prince William crossed the room, placed a protective hand behind Prince George's shoulder, and removed his eldest son from the celebration. The future king had made his choice, and Meghan's bold disrespect had crossed a line he would not allow anyone to erase. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William had entered the evening believing George was ready. The Royal Gala, a formal gathering where family members meet dignitaries, charity leaders, and invited press, was meant to give the young prince experience in public duty. Catherine stayed close without hovering, because confidence could not be handed to her son. He had to build it himself, one greeting and one difficult room at a time. George began well. He spoke carefully, remembered names, and carried the pride of a child determined not to disappoint his parents. Then Meghan stepped close enough to hear his rehearsed greeting and dismissed it as a performance arranged for cameras. Her voice carried farther than expected. Several guests heard it. More importantly, George heard every word. George changed at once. His eyes dropped, his shoulders tightened, and the confidence he had worked to hold disappeared. Catherine saw it happen. Surprise crossed her face, but anger quickly replaced it cold, measured, and personal. She did not interrupt. She watched William turn. The prince crossed the room without hesitation. He bent toward George, placed a steady hand behind his shoulder, and spoke softly, yet clearly. "You do not have to remain in a room where you are treated without respect." George looked up, wounded and uncertain. Yet his father did not waver. William escorted him out without asking Charles, the organizers, or the senior courtiers who managed the event. The Prince of Wales, the title held by the monarch's direct heir, had disrupted a major royal gala before powerful guests. Charles remained still. The king understood that stopping his son would turn protection into betrayal. Meghan stayed beside the banquet table, defiance visible until she noticed the silence around her. No senior royal defended her. No guest laughed. As the doors closed behind father and son, Catherine turned slowly toward Meghan. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. William had removed George from the room, but the deeper wound remained, and everyone left behind was about to reveal exactly where their loyalty stood. Behind the public titles stood a frightened child, a protective father, a furious mother, and a woman determined not to retreat. George had entered the gala believing he was taking another confident step toward his future. He left wondering whether that future had made him a target. For William, the humiliation reopened old fears about growing up beneath relentless judgment. For Catherine, it became a test of motherhood. And for Meghan, the remark quickly became something far more dangerous than a moment of defiance. George sat silently in a private reception room, pulling at the collar of his ceremonial jacket with trembling fingers. The formal coat was part of his public role, a carefully prepared appearance meant to help him understand the duties he may one day carry. Yet in that moment, none of the tradition mattered. He was still a child who had been mocked by an adult in front of strangers. After several painful seconds, he looked at William and asked, "Did I embarrass everyone?" William felt the question strike deeper than Meghan's remark. He knelt in front of his son, loosened the tight collar, and held his gaze. "You did nothing wrong," he said. "The embarrassment belongs to the person who tried to shame you, not to you." The prince understood exactly why those words mattered. He had grown up beneath constant judgment, often expected to remain composed while adults discussed his pain as though he could not hear them. He had promised his children something different. Catherine entered moments later and saw George fighting back tears. She crossed the room, pulled him into her arms, and felt his body finally relax. The princess had hoped he had missed part of Meghan's comment. His next words destroyed that hope. He repeated the phrase about his greeting being arranged for cameras, then asked whether people believed his efforts were fake. Catherine held him tighter, But sadness quickly hardened into controlled fury. Meghan's invitation had already divided the family. William had opposed her presence because he feared old resentment would follow her into the gala. Charles had supported the invitation as an act of reconciliation, meaning a public attempt to show that damaged family relationships could still be repaired. The king believed one successful evening might quiet years of hostility. Instead, his decision had placed George directly inside it. Meghan had shown her mood before the event even began. In a private recorded conversation with an associate, she said she would not perform submission around the Wales family. Her words revealed that she had entered the evening ready for conflict, not peace. Catherine soon received another blow. Meghan had refused to apologize and was insisting that William had exaggerated the incident to humiliate her. What George experienced as one cruel moment had been building for months, and one earlier confrontation had already pushed his father dangerously close to breaking point. The gala insult did not emerge from nowhere. Weeks earlier, behind the closed doors of a private family reception, Meghan had delivered a warning that William never forgot. It was spoken quietly, almost casually, but its meaning was unmistakable. She believed George's growing public role was being used to strengthen William and Catherine, while diminishing everyone outside their circle. That conversation became the hidden trigger, the point of no return, that transformed private resentment into the confrontation now threatening to divide the royal family once again. George had begun appearing at more formal occasions, and each appearance carried growing weight. Palace planners presented him beside his parents as a symbol of continuity, meaning the visible link between the present monarchy and its future. William saw careful preparation. Catherine saw a child learning duties step by step. Meghan saw something darker. To her, every greeting and public appearance seemed designed to prove that her own children would remain outside the family's central future. 3 weeks before the gala, Meghan confronted William during a private reception at Windsor. Near the music room, she accused him of placing George on display to make everyone else irrelevant. The prince did not answer immediately. He set down his untouched glass, looked directly at her, and warned that she could criticize him as an adult, but she must never turn resentment toward any of the children. Meghan refused to retreat. She argued that George was already being treated as a public symbol and could not be protected from commentary whenever the palace found criticism uncomfortable. Her words changed the argument. William had expected bitterness toward him. He had not expected her to defend directing it toward his son. Catherine heard the final part of the exchange. Later, when she and William were alone, the princess told him that Meghan's refusal to separate a child from institutional grievances made her presence around George emotionally unsafe. She did not speak from jealousy or anger. She spoke as a mother who had heard a boundary being challenged before it was broken. William acted quietly. In a private conversation with Charles, he asked the king to limit Meghan's contact with the children during major events. The monarch declined. He feared that visible exclusion would create a larger scandal and destroy any hope of public reconciliation. A senior aide tried to reduce the danger without making it obvious. The gala seating plan was adjusted to keep Meghan several places away from George. Yet a last-minute movement during the reception brought them close enough for the insult to happen. Now Catherine remembered every word from Windsor. The warning had been ignored, the boundary had been crossed, and she was no longer willing to protect the evening from the truth. Catherine did not raise her voice. She did not need to. As music continued and nervous guests pretended not to watch, the Princess of Wales crossed the gala floor and stopped directly in front of Meghan. The room remained glittering, but the warmth had disappeared. One mother had just watched her son leave in humiliation. The other woman stood accused of causing it. What followed was not a theatrical royal argument, it was a precise, devastating confrontation over a boundary Meghan had already been warned never to cross. Catherine had remained behind for one reason. William wanted one parent with George while the other made sure Meghan's version of events did not become the only story repeated inside the room. The princess understood the danger. Silence could easily be mistaken for weakness, and weakness could allow a cruel remark to be rewritten as a harmless misunderstanding. Charles watched from the head table, torn between duty and guilt. The king knew a public dispute could damage the evening, Yet he also knew Catherine had every right to defend her son. Meghan had been warned before. Now the child at the center of that warning had left the gala wounded. Catherine stopped only a few feet away. "You were warned that our children were not to become weapons in your disagreements with this family," she said quietly. Meghan held her ground. She claimed she had criticized the palace's presentation of George, not the boy himself. The princess did not blink. "He heard you," she replied, "and he understood exactly what you meant." Meghan refused to apologize. She argued that William and Catherine were using parenthood to silence criticism. Catherine reached for George's unused place card, turned it face down, and told an aide that her son would not return that evening. The simple movement carried more force than shouting. His place was empty, because one adult had chosen resentment over restraint. Sophie stepped closer as the tension sharpened. The trusted confidante had watched George leave, and had seen Meghan remain defiant. "Humiliating a child is not criticism," she said. "It is cruelty." Meghan turned toward her, but no answer came quickly enough. Charles finally spoke. He asked whether Meghan had used the exact words witnesses were now repeating. She hesitated. That pause confirmed more than any denial could have hidden. Camilla leaned toward the king and urged him to suspend the discussion until morning, hoping distance might prevent greater damage. Then William returned alone. The prince did not look toward Meghan. He went directly to Charles and requested a private meeting at once. George was safe with an aide, but his father had reached a decision. Meghan's access to future family events, he said, must now be formally reconsidered. The insult had been exposed, but William was no longer seeking an apology. He was preparing to decide who controlled the boundaries around his children. For decades, royal disputes had been softened by protocol, delayed by committees, and buried beneath carefully chosen language. William refused that pattern. Inside a private chamber away from the gala, he told Charles that protecting George could no longer depend on invitations, seating arrangements, or promises of better behavior. The king still held the crown, but William held something equally powerful: responsibility for the next heir. That distinction changed the balance of the argument, forcing Charles to confront a truth he had avoided since approving Meghan's attendance. Charles had authorized the gala guest list, which meant he held the formal power to decide who could attend similar royal gatherings in the future. William controlled something more personal. As George's father, he could withdraw the young prince from any public engagement whenever his welfare was at risk. The difference was no longer theoretical. One man controlled access to the event. The other controlled whether the heir would enter the room at all. Charles removed his glasses and pressed his fingers against his eyes. He admitted that he had hoped one successful evening might reduce years of hostility. The king had wanted reconciliation, a public sign that broken family relationships could still be repaired. Instead, his decision had exposed George to the very bitterness William had warned him about. William did not soften his answer. Reconciliation, he said, could not be purchased with his son's dignity. George would not become evidence of family unity when that unity did not exist. The prince then placed the child's gala program on the table and made his position clear. His son would attend no future event with Meghan unless she apologized directly and accepted firm boundaries around the children. Charles warned that such restrictions could be presented as deliberate exclusion. William remained unmoved. Public criticism, he argued, was less damaging than teaching George to stay silent when an adult humiliated him. The future king had spent too much of his own childhood learning how easily pain could be hidden behind duty. He would not pass that lesson to his son. The pressure tightened when a private briefing reached the chamber. 2 foreign guests and a charity patron had already given matching accounts of Meghan's words to the Lord Chamberlain's office, the department responsible for organizing major royal events and handling formal household matters. Their statements left little room for denial. Charles received another warning moments later. Palace communications staff could not honestly describe the incident as a misunderstanding, because too many guests had watched William escort George out. The king finally authorized an immediate review of Meghan's future invitations. Yet the decision came too late to contain the damage, while Charles struggled behind closed doors. One message sent from inside the gala had already carried the crisis beyond the palace walls. Before the final course had been served, the story was already moving beyond the palace walls. A brief message from a guest, William, has taken George out after a confrontation reached a newsroom and ignited immediate speculation. Inside the gala, empty chairs became more powerful than official statements. George was gone. William had returned only to confront the king. Catherine had refused to sit down. And Meghan, once defiant, began to recognize that the evening would not be remembered for her words alone, but for the father who rejected them. Communications officials gathered in a side office and argued over the first response. One advisor suggested saying George had left early because he was tired. Another warned that several guests had already described the exact moment William removed him after Meghan's remark. Palace Communications, the team responsible for shaping official public statements, could not build a believable explanation around a story too many people had witnessed. Meghan felt the danger when a message reached her phone. Journalists were asking whether she had insulted George directly. Her expression tightened. The evening had escaped royal control, and the question was no longer whether William had overreacted. It was whether she had mocked a child who could one day become king. Meghan stepped into an empty corridor and called Harry. She told him that William had turned a private disagreement into a public attack against her. Harry listened, then asked one simple question. "Did George hear what you said?" She answered indirectly, insisting that her words concerned the palace and not the boy. His silence grew heavy. He understood that the detail she would not confront might be the detail that condemned her. George faced a different fear. Back in the family suite, he told Catherine that he never wanted to attend another gala. He worried that people would laugh whenever he spoke and assume every greeting had been prepared for cameras. The princess tried to reassure him, but his words revealed damage deeper than embarrassment. He now connected royal duty with judgment from within his own family. William heard this from Catherine and felt his anger change. The prince had first believed he was protecting George from one cruel moment. Now he understood that his son's confidence had been shaken at its foundation. Charles made his decision before the evening ended. The king sent word that Meghan should leave through a private exit, meaning a departure hidden from waiting guests and press. She saw it as punishment, the first official consequence of what had happened. Meghan requested one final private conversation with William before leaving. But before she could reach him, George entered the room first. The adults had spent the night arguing over reputation and control. Yet the decision that changed William's course came from the child everyone claimed they were trying to protect. Away from the ballroom, the palace machinery, and the spreading headlines, George asked a question no advisor could answer for William. Sitting beside his father with no aides, cameras, or senior royals present, the young prince wanted to know whether being future king meant he would always have to remain polite when someone tried to hurt him. William had prepared George for ceremonies, greetings, and duty. He had not prepared him for betrayal within the family. His answer became the true turning point of the night. William joined his son in a quiet sitting room after Catherine helped George change out of his formal clothing. The princess left them alone, because this moment belonged to father and son. George understood that an heir, the person expected to inherit the crown, must learn patience and self-control. But now he feared those lessons meant accepting humiliation without resistance. George sat beside his father and asked, "When I am king, will I still be allowed to leave?" William did not answer at once. The prince heard more than a question about the gala. His son was asking whether duty would one day take away his right to protect himself. William chose his words carefully. He told George that duty sometimes required patience, restraint, and calm under pressure. But dignity, he said, never required staying where cruelty was being accepted as normal. The future king could serve others without surrendering his own humanity. George finally admitted what had hurt most. Meghan's comment made him feel that every greeting he practiced was fake, and that everyone watching might secretly believe the same thing. He had worked hard to do well, yet one remark had made that effort feel empty. William felt the wound because he recognized it. He told George that he had also grown up feeling watched, judged, and discussed by adults who forgot he could hear them. The prince confessed that his greatest failure would be teaching his son that the crown mattered more than emotional safety. That confession changed everything. William no longer wanted only an apology from Meghan. He wanted a clear family agreement that no royal child would ever be used in adult disputes, whether the target was George, Charlotte, Louis, Archie, or Lilibet. The boundary had to protect every child, or it meant nothing. William returned to Charles with a final decision. George would resume public duties because fear would not define his future. But Meghan would attend no event involving the Wales children until she accepted the new rule and took responsibility for what had happened. By sunrise, the palace would have to confirm George's return without hiding why his father had removed him. William had given his son reassurance, but outside the palace, one photograph and one headline were about to turn a family boundary into a national verdict. By morning, the most powerful image was not taken inside the Gala. It showed William and George leaving through a side entrance, the father's hand resting firmly across his son's upper back as the boy looked toward the ground. The photograph carried no sound, yet millions believed they understood it instantly. A parent shielding a child after a royal humiliation. Newspapers, broadcasters, and crowds seized upon the moment, forcing the palace to confront a public reaction far stronger and far more emotional than its advisors had anticipated. Palace officials released a restrained statement confirming that George had left early with his father after becoming distressed during a private family exchange. The careful wording satisfied no one. A palace statement is the monarchy's official explanation of an event, but this one avoided the detail everyone wanted. Witness accounts had already identified Meghan's remark, Catherine's confrontation, and William's immediate decision to remove his son. One newspaper captured the mood with brutal simplicity. Its front page showed William's hand resting protectively behind George beneath the headline, "A father before a future king." The words spread quickly because they turned a royal crisis into something deeply human. People were no longer debating only protocol. They were asking what any parent should do when a child is publicly humiliated. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered near the gates. One mother held a handwritten sign that read, "Protecting a child is never a royal scandal." Others repeated the message as cameras arrived. The gathering remained calm, yet its meaning was unmistakable. William had disrupted a grand event, but many saw protection rather than disobedience. Broadcasters divided sharply. Some argued that the prince had acted impulsively and allowed a family dispute to overwhelm royal duty. Others said he had shown the emotionally aware leadership the monarchy had often lacked. George's pain had exposed a question tradition could no longer hide. Should an heir be trained to endure everything, even cruelty from his own family? A palace correspondent then revealed during a live broadcast that Meghan's future invitations were under formal review. Attendance at events involving George, Charlotte, or Louis would now require approval from the Wales household, the team responsible for supporting William, Catherine, and their children. Harry released a written statement defending his wife from public abuse. Yet he did not deny that George heard the comment. That silence deepened the belief that a clear boundary had been crossed. Charles watched the morning coverage alone. The king understood that his attempt to display reconciliation had exposed the family's deepest divisions. He summoned William, Catherine, and Meghan for one final decision. The public had already delivered its judgment. Now Charles had to choose the permanent consequence. The final meeting did not restore the evening that had been lost. It could not erase George's humiliation, Catherine's anger, William's fury, or Meghan's refusal to understand the damage immediately. But it established something the monarchy had failed to declare for generations. Children would no longer be expected to absorb adult hostility for the sake of appearances. When Charles delivered his decision, the issue was no longer who had won a family argument. It was whether royal tradition could finally make room for emotional responsibility. Charles met William, Catherine, and Meghan in a private drawing room, with no extended relatives or communications advisors present. The king wanted no public language, no carefully managed excuses, and no attempt to soften what had happened. A family agreement, meaning a clear set of boundaries accepted within the royal household, now had to protect the children from conflicts they had never created. Charles began with an admission. His decision to present reconciliation at the gala had placed George in an environment where earlier warnings were ignored. The monarch had believed one peaceful evening could heal years of division. Instead, his hope had exposed a child to resentment that should never have reached him. Charles then delivered the consequence. Meghan would attend no official or private royal event involving George, Charlotte, or Louis until she apologized directly to the young prince and formally agreed never to involve the children in disputes with their parents. The king's words were calm, but they closed every path around accountability. Meghan argued that the restriction proved William controlled the family narrative. Catherine answered immediately. This was not about stories, image, or public advantage. It was about what George had heard, what he had felt, and why he had left the gala questioning his own worth. William demanded neither public humiliation nor permanent exile. The prince asked only for responsibility. Meghan could return once she acknowledged the harm and respected the boundary. His restraint made the truth impossible to dismiss. He was protecting his children, not pursuing revenge. Meghan refused to apologize that day. She left knowing that her access to events involving the Wales children had been suspended indefinitely. The consequence was not hidden, delayed, or weakened. Days later, George returned beside William at a smaller royal engagement. The young prince completed his greeting confidently, then looked toward his father. The future king gave him a quiet nod. Catherine watched her son recover what the gala had nearly taken from him, while Charles accepted that unity created through silence was never unity at all. William's decision did not weaken the monarchy, it changed it. George remained a child before he was a symbol, and the crown's future would no longer be built only on endurance. It would be built on dignity, protection, and boundaries strong enough to defend those who could not yet defend themselves. Nothing remained unresolved. Meghan faced the consequence of refusing accountability. George returned with his confidence intact, and William proved that tradition could never again be used to excuse cruelty. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.